Is Jealous Devil Flex a good fuel for your charcoal grill? Hi, I'm Ryan from the Grill Top Experience, and I have tested a lot of different charcoals to be able to find out which ones perform the best. Only the Jealous Devil Flex isn't charcoal at all. Most charcoal is charred and then compressed into briquettes, but Jealous Devil Flex is 100% white oak and it's compressed into these flower-shaped pucks. And they might be a good alternative for someone who doesn't really trust the ingredients in normal charcoal briquettes. And these things are absolutely huge. Most charcoal briquettes weigh between 30 and 55 grams, but these ones clock in at 121 grams a piece. That's 3 or 4 times bigger than your average charcoal briquette. And I'm going to run these through my suite of tests and compare them to Fogo charcoal briquettes, which I've never used and are made out of coconut husks. Fogo ranked the highest in the lump charcoal hot and fast taste test. I'm really excited to see how it performs in this test. If you're interested, Jealous Devil Flex says that it's made in the USA right on the front of the bag, but on the back it says that it's made in Paraguay, and I'm not really sure which one to believe, but I'd like to believe it's made in the United States because right on the front it's got a guy that looks like he's from Duck Dynasty and has a USA flag bandana. Fogo charcoal says that it's made in Vietnam. One bag says that it's as pure as heaven, but hotter than hail, and the other has a scripture on the bag. The first test is to see how well the charcoal burns on its own and how much ash it produces once it's done. In order to test that, I take a pie tin and I get as close to 600 grams of charcoal in each one. For the Jealous Devil Flex, that is 5 briquettes, whereas the Fogo charcoal nearly fills the entire pie tin. And the Flex says right on the bag that it takes a little bit more in order to be able to light it and suggests 2 standard fire starters. In this case, I'm using tumbleweed style ones. So to give it that advantage, I put 2 of the tumbleweeds in with the Jealous Devil Flex and 1 in with the Fogo charcoal. Once it's lit, the only thing left to do is to leave all the vents open and leave the grill alone overnight to let everything completely burn out. Only I ran into one problem with the Jealous Devil Flex, and that is it burned out way sooner than it was supposed to and had lots of fuel left over. So I got out my torch and got everything really well lit, and then about 30 minutes later I had to do it again because it still didn't burn all the way through. The next day I took the remnants of the Fogo charcoal and gave it a little shake, and it weighed in at 100 grams, which put it squarely in first place compared to all of the other charcoal briquettes that I've tested for having the lowest amount of ash. It also only had 9 grams of unburnt charcoal, which is pretty good as well. It had almost a complete burn. And the Jealous Devil Flex failed this test because I couldn't get anywhere near a complete burn, but you'll also notice that I didn't have much ash in the pie tin when it was left over. That's something I'm really interested in, and I'll have those results when I do a cook test later. You'll be able to see how much ash it produces, even though we're not going to measure it. Another test that I like to do is to be able to see how much weight of the charcoal you can fit in a standard Weber charcoal chimney. The idea is the more weight that you have, the more fuel that you have to burn, and that comes in handy in low and slow cooks when you're trying to get as much fuel as you can in the smallest space. In practice though, charcoal has more heat energy gram for gram than standard wood, so in this case it's not a great comparison, but I still want to be able to look at it compared to the other charcoals that we have. And Jealous Devil Flex weighed in at just under 3,100 grams, which is well above any of the other charcoals that I've tested. And the Fogo was no slouch either. It weighed in at just under 2,700 grams, which puts it at the head of the pack for any of the charcoals that I've tested. But let's check out and see how it burns. And for this test, we want to see how quickly we can light a chimney of charcoal and get it ready to put on the grill so that way we can start cooking. So for the Jealous Devil Flex, I gave it the advantage of starting with 2 fire starters to follow the directions on the package exactly, and they said it should run for a full 20 minutes until things are nice and red hot, which is about 5 to 8 minutes longer than your average charcoal would take. And both the bag and the online product reviews say that the Jealous Devil Flex smokes a lot, and I feel like that was really understated. And for the first 10 minutes or so, the Jealous Devil Flex put out way more smoke than I've had on any other charcoal that I've tested, both with briquettes and lump charcoal. But it wasn't the acrid kind of smoke that you can get with some briquettes. It was more of a strong campfire wood smoke. So if your neighbors are close, or if you have a lot of people in your backyard for that cook, you might want to rethink the use of the Flex. And after 10 or 15 minutes, the cloud by day gave way to a pillar of fire. I don't normally wear gloves when I dump charcoal from the chimney into the Weber kettle, but I did in this case because it was very, very hot. And after I dumped it, it was pretty obvious that the claim that these briquettes are hotter than hail was absolutely true. This fire was hotter than anything that I wanted to cook on it, and I didn't want to burn my steak, so I put the lid back on to be able to tame that fire down. And for the first time ever, my thermometer rolled all the way around to the point where it looked like it wasn't even on. And that's when the smoke show started again. The Fogo charcoal lit like any standard charcoal briquette, but with a lot less smoke than normal. And it dumped into the grill just like I would expect. With 2 Weber kettles lit, I wanted to be able to do a taste test with a steak. And for the flex, the steak spent most of the time on the cooler side of the grill until I could build up enough confidence that I wasn't going to absolutely burn it. And so I used the cold grate method and spun it around and put it over the hottest part of the fire until it was seared just like I like, and then I put it on the cool side of the grill until it came up to temperature. But the Fogo charcoal grilled the steak without any fanfare or pyrotechnics, which is exactly how I like it, but how did they taste? And the difference between the two was absolutely huge. The Fogo charcoal had a light, grilled, and smoky taste, whereas the Jealous Devil Flex had an incredibly strong smoke flavor. It had definitely been cooked over some wood. It was a little bit stronger than I would have liked as well. And you might be able to avoid that by letting the charcoal burn a little bit longer, but I thought I wasn't going to have that issue because I was grilling without the lid on. And that should let most of the smoke dissipate and burn it as hot as possible. I had Mrs. GTE taste them as well, and she said that she would have preferred something that was in between the 2 different charcoals, which is exactly how I would use it, where I would take my favorite charcoal and add a little bit of the Jealous Devil Flex, that way I get the real wood smoke in my cook. And the back of the bag shows them using the Jealous Devil Flex inside of a Ghazni dome, and I could see it being useful in high temperature cooks when you were already going to use wood anyway. So how much ash is left over after that cook? Well, it's the next day. Let's take a look. There's not as much ash as you'd expect for the amount of charcoal that was burned. This burns more like regular wood, which is a significant advantage over other brands. If you're looking for a more natural alternative to standard charcoal briquettes, check out this video where I test a bunch of different kinds of lump charcoal. You'll be able to see how Jealous Devil stacks up among the rest.